People who have been clinically dead and brought back to life. What was your experience? When I was 10 years old, I fell from the roof of our house and landed on my head. I was in and out of consciousness on the way to the hospital via ambulance. When I recovered, they said I was legally dead at one point at the hospital, but they revived me with paddles after 5 minutes. I remember nothing at all, only the darkness of a deep dreamless sleep. The headache when I came to was unbearable. I was extremely lucky not to have any major spinal damage from the fall. Just a huge lump on my head that went away after about a week. No other injuries. Extremely lucky not to have major spinal damage and also to still be alive. That sounds like it was terrifying for both you and your family. Please stay off roofs from now on. Aside from the experience everyone really talks about when they are dying, while they think it is what they experience when they are actually dead, such as seeing a light or loved ones, there was absolutely nothing. No sense of calm, no darkness, nothing. One moment I was dying and seeing things, and the next I was coming back alive. Exactly. Like. I will never remember it. There was nothing. No fear, no pain, no bliss, no joy. It scares the hell out of me. Clinically dead is basically just unconscious with no way to sustain your own life. What you do and don't remember is up to chance, but it's guaranteed to be full of hallucinations and misinterpretations by your barely functioning brain that are left behind when your functioning brain tries to fill in the gaps and give you something after you're resuscitated. This is what scares the most about death. Being dead is probably cool, but the hallucinations before you're truly gone look very terrifying. Have you been there? There's just nothing. There's no you to experience anything. All I remember is watching The Nightmare Before Christmas in a hospital room and waking up on Christmas Eve in the ICU. Pretty uneventful. I shot dope, got really high, then dropped to the floor. My friends packed my groin with ice cubes and took turns punching me in the face, but I just lay there, unresponsive. EMT saved me. I almost certainly suffered some amount of brain damage, as I was gone for several minutes. There was no bright light, nothing noteworthy. I'm convinced that when you go, you're worm food, no fancy cosmic procession. The paramedics treated me like human garbage after I came back, and for most of the ambulance ride to the hospital. They treated me like an actual person once I was lucid enough to be articulate. All I could think of was my mother. If I had stayed dead, she would have perished from grief. Last time I ever stuck a needle in my arm. About 13 years ago. Stuck ice cubes in your groin? Why exactly? That's a common way to bring someone around who is on the brink of an overdose. The EMTs even remarked that my friends had apparently done this before. I used the same technique on a friend who tried to commit suicide with opiates years later. Luckily, once the ice bag was placed on his ball bag, he slowly sat up with a confused and uncomfortable expression on his face. Better than dying. Wow, never heard of this before. Better to know, I guess. Thanks for the useful info, fellow Redditor. I caught a TV show on a smaller network, A&E, TLC, I think the name was True Stories of the ER or something like that. In one episode they actually used ice on a guy's stuff, but it wasn't for an overdose. Has something to do with slowing blood flow and limiting brain damage. IDK. Could it be Untold Stories of the ER? Was crushed by a semi on an ice road. My entire existence turned into vibrational sound. Just a huge center of a thunderbolt crashing, shaking, booming vibration. Next thing I know, it all subsides, and instead of pain, everything starts fading. I felt my balls try to void, my lungs not respond to my desire to breathe, and then I was floating in a void with a bubble of light suspended some distance in front of me. It was incredibly relaxing, comforting and freeing. I knew without a doubt I had died. I wasn't scared or anything really, I had clarity of thought not skewed by emotion. I started to look at the light now and realized it was a projection of what my eyes were seeing through my slumped overhead. I could see my cell phone on the floor of my truck where my head was pointing, and had a thought about how I just died and I didn't say goodbye to my wife or my kids and how they're going to feel. I wished I could get to the phone, and suddenly I started moving forward and back into my normal frame of reference. I started breathing again. The pain started too. I slowly regained some motor function and reached for my phone, but I could feel the blood draining out of me and knew if I called anyone it would be for them to listen to me die. I was conscious again, so I was going to do something. I started feeling around to see what kind of shape I was in. I reached down to my leg, but my fingers just found burger meat. I grabbed at a chunk of jeans and flesh and started pulling until what was left of my lower leg came flopping out from being wrapped around the brake pedal. I then grabbed and squeezed as hard as I could, knowing most people die in this situation because it hurts too much to self-apply pressure on massive trauma. I did it anyways, while screaming with the effort. Long story short, other people came. I got bandaged and bounced around in the back of a pickup for 300 kms and then met the ambulance. Got on the good gas and bounced between hospitals to get relimbed, stapled and stitched back together. I had a broken tibia, severed Achilles, multiple lacerations, a fractured hip, compressed spine, twisted wrist and a plethora of soft tissue damages and disruption from massive G-force trauma 5 years later on, and I'm in pain every day and if given another opportunity will just die. Man, you have really persevered. You've dealt with horrors nobody has and pain not many have. You have got to be some sort of fucking titan or something. Amazing person. People always say stuff like amazing person when they hear about this, but I feel like that's just to make ourselves feel better. Like it couldn't just happen to anyone with the randomness of life. If you had to deal with the same stuff tomorrow, it wouldn't make you an amazing person. It would just make you a person who's struggled a lot. It's very sad. Not sure if this counts. I suffered an atrial fibrillation which couldn't be controlled without the doctor stopping my heart and paddling me back again. 47 seconds. I was clinically dead. Not a lot I know, but my memory of it was the anesthesia, then slowly vision fading out. Was like a darkness closing in. No panic. No unusual feelings. Then when I came to, almost like the reverse, just slowly woke up, heart back in normal rhythm. Can't say I saw any lights or tunnels or anything. Oh man. Now I want to ask my dad about his experience with the paddling for his AFib. Thanks for sharing. My dad actually had it to around the same age as me. We're both good now, haven't had a repeat or anything. Apparently can be a hereditary thing. Be good to ask him. Unfortunately it wasn't successful for my dad. He's got to get an ablation in a couple weeks. Really? Not a lot? That's 47 seconds more than anyone should die. At least young. We all go sometime. I died in the surgical theater and again in the recovery room. I don't recall anything from the surgical theater, but the recovery room everything started burning, then I got tunnel vision. What I could see started getting further and further away and everything was fading to black. I remember trying to move my arms but feeling like they were pinned down by an unmovable object. After that, just peace and euphoria for what seemed like an eternity. Then pain. So much pain. Everything was on fire. The surgery site wasn't even the worst and it was major surgery. I started screaming as best I could. In my head it was loud, but I had a breathing tube down my throat. I wanted to start vomiting everywhere. I passed out after pulling the breathing tube out my throat and spewing everywhere. I was also convinced the recovery room crash doctor was some kind of ginger angel with ginger wings, which is odd as I'm an atheist. After I woke up the second time I asked her out to dinner. She said no. I laughed. I got the tube out before spewing. The euphoria was amazing. I've subsequently taken to chasing adrenaline rushes to try and repeat it but not come close. Now I realize why it is named as theater. They literally used to perform surgeries for an audience in Victorian times. Surgery that stopped people from dying was probably the moon landing of its day. Incredible the first few years, and then ho-hum afterwards. There are very different answers throughout the thread. Some saw light, some made choice, some felt nothing. Life and death really is a strange phenomenon. True. Something we may never understand. At some point we will. How would we though, when everything can only be based on people's experiences? And obviously only people that died or nearly died. It isn't measurable or comprehensible. I mean, as individuals, when we die, your brain shuts down. They obviously feel nothing, and the next time they are awake, it isn't that hard to understand. Except for some people it isn't nothing. Stuff like out-of-body experiences. what they feel during the nothing, etc. That means they were actually in coma, dreaming, and not clinically dead. My best friend was hit head on by a drunk driver. He states he does remember the 10-minute ambulance ride to the hospital, but then he coded in the trauma room. He heard a voice claiming to be his grandma talking to him. He never met her as she passed before he was born. They said they were about to call it when they got a pulse back. Drunk drivers are awesome. I nearly was killed by a drunk driver, twice from the same accident. The first time, hitting me with a car. The second time, after surgical complications. Son of a bitch was driving home from the same bar I had been at. I was walking home. Nearly killed me because he didn't want to wake up hungover and move his car in the morning. Here in London all drivers are awesome. I'll drink to that. Bad joke, I know. My grandma was presumed dead for about 3 minutes and she had told me that it was at first black, then she saw a light and there was a voice. It sounded like her father who passed away late 80s early 90s, and he said not yet, and my grandma woke up to my grandpa slapping her to wake her up. Me and her both thought at the last part to this day. The same thing happened to me when I was dead for a few minutes after a head injury. I didn't see anything, but before I woke up I saw white and heard a voice calling me. That's really interesting. What happened to your head? I don't know the term in English, it's not my first language, but basically I fell down the stairs and hit with my head. It was basically a severe concussion. Damn, thankfully nothing severe has happened to me yet. And hopefully nothing will happen. Yup, thanks.